he also was involved in a lot of other more nefarious things. He's a bit of a shadow figure. And both of them are really focused on how do I find my way in this life, in this world, without sacrificing who I am internally. And when it comes to kind of navigating those experiences, I think it really came down to, for those characters, how do I connect with people? You know, how can I find something in me that connects with the person I'm speaking with? And especially with Jay, that was really how he maneuvered through life. And I think that represents Maxwell Street in a great way as well. It's really about how do we connect with each other? How do I share something with me that shares something with you? How can we make a deal through that? So that was really kind of the heart of a lot of our characters.
Not to give any spoilers away, but you see that right away in the opening action. It's just so gripping, where Jay, as a kid, a teen, is fleeing this off essentially, and it's related to those racial prejudices, if not outright violence. You know, it's something that just grabs you right away. But I love the book. What else might you say about some of the other characters, like her friend? I love the Sequoia character.
So, Sequoia is a bit of a fan favorite for those who haven't read the book. She is the daughter of a prominent Methodist bishop within the Black community here, and she's very much a great kind of encapsulation of Clapper society, but she's also a character who's trying to navigate her life in the city and use what she considers to be her gifts at community, her gifts at cleverness, at banter, at style, in order to find her way into communities that would more or less try to keep her out. So she's a whole lot of fun. She's very, very stylish. She wears the best clothes in the book. But she also speaks the most truth. She's one of the characters who can see through everyone very easily. So you have all these individuals who are trying to put on masks and pretend and present who they think people want them to be. And Sequoia is very much someone who says, I see who you are, I see what you're doing, and you're doing it poorly. If you're going to pretend, at least try to have some class to it. So that's really kind of who that character is. She's definitely a fan favorite.
I might bring the whole her background with horses and stuff, because I find that fun too. If you want to see something about Nellie's horse sense, if you will.
Yeah, of course. So Nellie's family, how they came about their money in the course of the novel is that they are horse breeders from Kentucky. And that was really to honor the tradition of African Americans being so heavily involved in Kentucky horse breeding and Kentucky horse racing. But pretty much all of the original jockeys prior to emancipation were enslaved. But with the rise of Jim Crow, more individuals were preventing black jockeys from actively participating in Kentucky horse racing and Kentucky horse breeding because they got to pay them. So I wanted their family to really be a representation to honor the beautiful history that black Americans have in Kentucky horse breeding, in American horse breeding and horse racing. Even if that family didn't ultimately exist in that time period, I wanted their family to be a kind of homage to what they did.
Thank you so much, Avery. Do you have other things you want to tell our audience about the book and what you're doing now? If you want to segue into something about your history in the publishing, arts, and writing world.
Yeah, of course. And I know some people actually came here to hear this reading today, and some people are just wandering in and out. So if you're someone who really enjoys not just historical fiction, but enjoys stories about individuals and how they rise through their own ranks, whatever those ranks may be, then I really recommend the Maxwell Street. I think it's a really fun read, and it's a fun kind of walk through 1920s Chicago. There are a lot of individuals that will piece out. You have characters like Mayor Thompson who shows up. A lot of individuals from gangland Chicago in the 1920s show up. There are streets you may recognize, buildings you may recognize. So even if you just want a nice kind of walk through the city in that time, then I kind of really do, and I hate to be biased, but I do recommend the book for that reason and for nothing else. And then in terms of what's coming next, I can't entirely talk about it. It hasn't been officially announced yet, but hopefully I'll be back around this area on the circuit again in January 2027 when my next book should be coming out. So it will be set in Chicago, I'm sorry. It will be all the way back down south in Arkansas. But that more or less is what's next. But if you have any questions, of course, or you want to learn more about what's coming next year, you're welcome to stop and see me at the signing, and we can talk a little bit more. But I think we have time for Q&A, though.
Yeah, I want to, everyone who just joined us, with author Avery Cunningham, and her book, The Maxwell Street, is going to be for sale, and you can have her sign it. The book joint, who's at 689th and Stony Island, great bookstore down there, is selling it today, and we hope you buy it. And again, we're the Maxwell Street Foundation, where our tent is down at the very end of the block near the book joints, and we'd love to chat with you more about the history of the Maxwell Street Market and this neighborhood, and some of the buildings here even that have been preserved on this block and on Halsted. Check them out as you're leaving. We have a tour of one as well that's starting down at the end. So we're really glad to have you here today. We know we have a few DePaul students up here, and Avery again went to DePaul and got her master's in arts writing and publishing.
More or less.
Yeah. So she was at the law DePaul alum, and do you have any questions out there?
Do we want to do a reading real quick?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Let's do your reading.
No worries. I'll do a short portion. Just for tape. Alright, so what I'm probably going to read from is the first time that our main character, Ellie, visits the speakeasy that our other main character, Jay Shore, manages on Maxwell Street. It's kind of her first time walking into this environment and looking around, getting a sense of the individual's diversity and vibrancy as well. It's only going to be a short section, but hopefully this will give you a little bit of an insight into how Maxwell Street is represented and the role it plays in the course of the novel. The club was packed with people, most of them dancing. Most looked like they'd just come in off a factory floor, a restaurant's kitchen, or scrubbing toilets at a tycoon's mansion. Others dressed in the way of the old country, wherever that might have been. And one woman in particular wore a million tiny glass teardrops draped so that when she danced, she sparkled like the heart of a chandelier. All this was filtered through the music's constant, thrumming presence and drove the energy of the place, and that energy was frantic. A woman on the stage at the far end of the club perspired and screamed. Her voice was raw and untethered as she sang the familiar song, You Better Run, but not in the old way. Instead of Moses and Samson, these lyrics told of 35th Street, Lincoln Theater, and the Stroll. The desperately hopeful spiritual now had a static to it that would have been sacrilegious, but not in the way folk dance. Together they threw up their hands and sang Run, Run, Run in all their accents of English. They moved with a current that felt like worship, bringing the song out of the South into this bright new city of refuge. Thank you. So yeah, what are some questions now? So the question was, what did the research process look like going up to the book? Well, it's interesting. The one thing for writers, I think, especially historical writers, we love research. We love learning more about the time period and the people that we're wanting to represent. But also that research is a bit of a black hole. You start down one line, you get really fascinated with whatever fabric was most popular at that time period, and you fall into a deep research hole, talking about the development of that fabric and the companies that produce that fabric and who could afford to wear that fabric. All to have maybe 5 words describing one article of clothing that people may read once and then never read about again. So that's just one of the wonderful, exhilarating parts of historical fiction, but also one of the draining parts of research. So leading up to this book, I tried to approach it with primary sources. So starting with accounts of the time period, there was one really beautiful article that I recommend that everybody reads. It's called The Negro in Chicago. It was produced by the city of Chicago in 1919 in reaction to the race riots that just happened. Oh, puppy! Sorry, that's right. So it's a huge document, maybe 1,000 some odd pages, but it's one of the most detailed accounts of the Black experience in any city, especially in that time period. It goes into detail about where did Black individuals live, why did they live there, how did mortgage brokers respond to Black clients, how did employers respond to Black clients, Where did Black individuals worship? What were those churches' histories? Where were people coming from? Why were they migrating to Chicago in particular, and from what parts of the country? And that was a really excellent primary source. It gave me a true understanding of what this city represented for so many Black individuals and what that lifestyle really was. So that's one thing that I highly recommend. You can purchase it really from any bookseller. It has been fully printed, fully published. It's huge. Again, it's 1,000 pages, but it's a really fascinating read. Also, The Warmth of Other Suns, which is probably the most detailed, thorough account we will ever have of the Great Migration. That was an excellent resource. It, of course, it didn't just focus on Chicago, but Chicago was really one of the kind of the head of the spear when it came to the Great Migration, especially the first and the second one. And for those who are not familiar, the Great Migration is when millions of Black Americans came out of the South, escaping oppression, escaping violence, escaping lack of job opportunities, viable job opportunities, and went north, went west, went east, looking for work and looking for a better life. And Chicago really did collect so many individuals from the South. I was just telling someone, Memphis is the sister city to Chicago. If you speak to 5 people, they're going to say, oh, my cousin lives in Chicago, my brother lives in Chicago, all of my people are from Chicago. We have a whole other branch of the family that left in 1953. So The Warmth of Other Suns and that accounting of the Great Migration gave a really powerful insight into the 1920s. And I think when I first started writing, I wanted to write something a little bit flashier, very Gatsby-esque, but then I read that book in particular, and I realized this cannot be a flashy story. As much as we love 1920s flash, this had to have some kind of heart of realism to it in order to honor the actual lived experience that came out here. So those are 2 sources that I really recommend. And of course, all of the books that have been published about Maxwell Street, of course, Laura and Lori's book, which you can purchase right down the street at the Maxwell Street booth. But also Ira Burkow's accounting of the Maxwell Street market, which came out in, the 70s maybe? Truly excellent. A really, really personalized narrative about the individuals who lived on the street at that time.
Avery, can we ask you about that quote I think you've mentioned from The Great Gatsby that was an inspiration for you? I don't know if you know it off the top of your head.
Oh, yes. So what she's speaking of, there's a quote I always talk about that really lodged in my head from Gatsby since I read it back in high school. And it was, I was both within and without. And for me, I think, Nick Garraway at the time was talking about kind of the difference between being surrounded by all of this vibrancy and party atmosphere while seeing New York transpire outside that window. But I think for our characters, it was about existing in 2 worlds. I was both within this community, whether that be ethnically, socioeconomically, based on class, based on wealth, based on lack of wealth, but I was also without. I could never fully exist within that community. And that became kind of a through line for all of our characters, where they were both within and without, and we were trying to struggle with that reality. Any other questions?
Was my favorite character. And so I was just wondering how you came up with him and how you developed his character. Because at the very beginning, it's this person that you fall in love with, you really root for him, you want him to come out on top. But then as the story progresses, he turns kind of into this sinister character and you kind of like, I don't know how I feel about him. So how did that character develop?
Awesome. So the question was about Jay Shorey, who's one of our main characters. And when we see him on Maxwell Street, he's the proprietor of the speakeasy that I referenced earlier. But when we first meet him, it's when, as was referenced earlier, he's fleeing Alabama in 1915 at the threat of racial violence. And she mentioned how he's such a likable character. Jay Shorey is very easy to like, and that's kind of the point of him. He realized very early on in his life experience that my value is only afforded to me based on how other people view me. I need people to like me. I need people to want to talk to me. That's why he speaks so many languages, to prevent himself from being kept out of any rooms, to make himself resourceful, to make himself useful. And that's one of the things that's really exciting about Jay. I love writing his character for that reason. He's very much a bit of a magician. He's everywhere at once. He's useful to everyone. He knows everyone. He knows how to talk himself into any room and make himself kind of the star of that room. But she also mentioned that he's a bit of a malicious character, especially as you get towards the end. And I think that comes a lot from him being someone who's biracial at this time period, and more especially someone who can technically pass as white while being more black. And I think for him, he has a lot of conflict about who he is. He's very proud of his race, proud of his history, but he wants options. And he knows in order to achieve these options that I see other people having, I have to be something other than myself. So over the course of his entire experience in the novel, he kind of loses bits and pieces of himself. And by the end, he doesn't even fully recognize who he is anymore. So that's kind of the tragedy of a character like Jay, is that I'm stripping away bits of myself to achieve something greater, and by the end, when I've accomplished all of this success and security, I'm not even who I was when I started anymore. So it's like becoming your own ghost, more or less, which is, I think, a tragic reality that a lot of individuals experience not only in the 1920s, but today as well. So that answers your question. Any other questions? So the question was, were there any characters that I really connected with and that kind of really just flowed very easily during the writing process? Jay, surprisingly, it's not so much that I connected with him, but he was someone who always was doing something on the page. Like, you never really feel confident when Jay Shorty was in the room. You just never really be sure what his motivations were. And that made him so much fun to write. I think the reason Shakespeare writes so many villains and why I really loved him when I was younger is because villains are fun. Villains enjoy themselves. Not to say that Jay is a villain, but he is an antagonist in his own way, and kind of a hero of his own story. So that made him a lot of fun to write. Sequoia is a fan favorite again. She's tons of fun to write. She's not like me at all, but I think that's why I enjoyed writing her so much. I was able to step into a lot of things more confident, and more self-aware, and more willing to speak truth to power. So that's why I really enjoyed writing her. But yeah, those are the characters that flowed the most easily. I think Nellie was the hardest to write, truly. I think understanding that she was not as morally sound as what she hoped she could be, that she made mistakes and she had to live with those consequences, that was hard to kind of swallow as a writer. You want your heroes to be very righteous, but it requires a bit of sacrifice to make heroes. Yeah.
So the party scene. So when they went to the house and there was this very sinister party happening, I was wondering if that was fiction or if that was pulled from some history that you read about and researched about.
Yeah. So the question was, in the course of the novel, characters go into the more affluent suburbs of Chicago to a black and tan party. For those who aren't familiar, black and tan parties became really popular in that time era, and especially in the 1920s, when there were I won't say fewer constraints, but when especially white patrons were no longer quite as concerned about going to black establishments. So you had a sudden mixing of cultures, and usually party environments, club environments, musical environments, places where there was dancing, places where there was alcohol, especially in the 1920s. So Prohibition really blurred a lot of those lines, when people decided, I'm going to go wherever I need to go to get a drink. So some of those color lines really kind of fade away in Prohibition. And the party they go to is a black and tan party. It's a little bit sinister, it's very, very lively, very colorful, but definitely a little bit sinister. And while that party in particular was fiction, that is an interesting representation of the type of fun, quote unquote, people were having in the 1920s. It was a bit of a hedonistic time period. I mentioned earlier, it was a time of a lot of individualism, a lot of self-manifestation. So people, especially after the horrors of the Spanish flu and World War I, were shedding so many of their inhibitions, and that could come across as a bit of a violently joyful lifestyle in some instances. So while that party in particular maybe didn't exist, it's a bit of a metaphor, I suppose, for the mindset of the party experience. Any other questions?
Thank you again, Avery Cunningham, and we were just so delighted to have you here visiting our fine city. How about a round of applause?
Thank you for having me.
Thanks again to DK's Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events, Nikki and Neil and everybody who happen. Thanks to all the vendors who showed up and other performers. Go to Maxwell Street Foundation. We will be here with the market next year, we hope, and see you all again. This is the last market day of the season. It'll be here May for October, once a month next year. Again, thank you, Avery, and one more.
Thank you so much for having me.
And the book sales are